Shukadeva Goswami said, O best of the Kurus, while Bali Maharaj was describing his fortunate position in this way, the most dear devotee of the Lord, Prahlad Maharaj, appeared there like the moon rising in the night time. So just, for those of us who didn't get a chance to sort of tune into the previous classes, we are right now in the final part of the pastimes of Bali Maharaj. And this is the part where he has already been bound by Vamanadev, because he couldn't fulfill his vow of giving in charity of Vamanadev's 3 steps. So at this point, he's already made his prayers. He's saying that of great humility. He's feeling some kind of remorse even. And also in this chapter, Prahlad Maharaj makes an appearance. His grandfather, a pure devotee of the Lord, Prahlad Maharaj, makes an appearance. And later on, Brahmaji also comes to make an appearance, who intervenes on behalf of Bali Maharaj and asks Vamanadev to release him. And also Bali Maharaj's wife, she also prays on behalf of Bali Maharaj. So now we're going to focus on today's class. The 3 verses we're doing is especially going to focus on the just before Prahlad Maharaj starts his prayers, when he makes an appearance, what is Bali's reaction to it, and what he feels when he sees his great pure devotee grandfather, Prahlad Maharaj. And it's also interesting that both Bali Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj caused the Lord to appear. Prahlad Maharaj caused the Lord to appear by his devotion. Nrsimhadev came to protect him from his father, Hiranyakashipu. Bali Maharaj also caused the Lord to appear, but for a very different reason. He came because he actually came to protect his devotee Indra from Bali taking over the heavenly planets. So although the appearance is there, externally the reasons are different. He came to vanquish Bali Maharaj in one way. But at the same time, his pastime unfolds, we'll see how Bali Maharaj is in many ways even superior to Indra, because he surrendered everything, including everything he achieved materially. So let's read the last translation.
Yeah, that's nice explanation there. Sanskrit.
Which translation?
The Sanskrit.
Tamindrasena swapitamaham shriya virajamanam nalinaye yatekshanam pramshum pishangham param anjanatvisham pralamba bahum subhagara shabham maikshata. Then Bali Maharaj saw his grandfather Prahlad Maharaj, the most fortunate personality, whose dark body resembled black ointment for the eyes. His tall, elegant figure was dressed in yellow garments. He had long arms, and his beautiful eyes were like the petals of a lotus. He was very dear and pleasing to everyone.
And it's interesting, we both thought of the same thing when we read this verse, because of how Prahlad Maharaj is described as being extraordinarily beautiful in his black figure. So we were thinking that could be used as a social commentary. Do you want to say something?
Well, I mean, I just want to point out that from the Vedic perspective, like nowadays, especially in India and also other parts of the world, generally we have this perception that fairness or whiteness is beautiful. From the Vedic perspective, color of the skin is not really the sort of criteria for beauty. We see that here, Prahlad Maharaj, his body is described as being Anjana Tvisham, which is black ointment for the eyes. So I'm just assuming, but there's this ointment that women use called kajal, some sort of a black.
Or in America, it's called eyeliner. But
okay.
Yeah. Same thing.
So anyway, so he's compared to that kind of color. And besides Prahlad Maharaj, we also see that there are other personalities. For example, Arjuna is also described as being dark complexioned. And also Mother
Draupadi.
Yashoda is described as being dark complexion, and also Draupadi, who was one of the most beautiful woman at that time. There were others also, Gandhari and Kunti, but she was also especially so beautiful that everyone, it's mentioned that when she came for her when her father Drupada presented her during a Swayamvara and invited all the kings to participate in the competition for her hand. It seems that when she came out carrying a garland, and all the kings saw her beauty, immediately they became so enlivened and fired up, and and charged up. They just all spontaneously got up from their seats and drew their swords at each other, saying, "She's mine, she's mine," just spontaneously by her. When they're attracted by beauty, it just created a huge sense of competition amongst themselves, that they just got up with the swords and started brandishing it against one another. So
The power of sex attraction.
so anyway, so there's Kshatriyas were like that, very passionate. But anyway, the point is that Draupadi, although another name for her was Krishna, which means like blackish, so still, it's in Vedic, if you look at the literature, it's usually the shape or the features of the body that's considered to be, hallmarks of beauty, not so much the complexion.
Yeah, I think especially during these times, it's important to hear that.
Maybe some comments or questions there.
Oh, I don't know. Let's see what people have to say.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a good point, Athena. Yeah.
What does Athena say? The pictures depict Draupadi as being very fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she wasn't. She was beautiful and blackish.
And also Arjuna and the Mother Yashoda, and some say Bhishma. So.
And you're beautiful too, and you're brown. Okay. Tasmai baler varuna pashayantrita samarhanam no pajahara purvavat nanamamord nashu vilolalochana savrida nichina Babhuvaha. Being bound by the ropes of Varuna, Bali Maharaj could not offer befitting respect to Prahlad Maharaj as he had before. Rather, he simply offered respectful obeisances with his head, his eyes being inundated with tears and his face lowered in shame. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Since Bali Maharaj had been arrested by Lord Vamanadev, he was certainly to be considered an offender. Bali Maharaj seriously felt that he was an offender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Certainly, Prahlad Maharaj would not like this. Therefore, Bali Maharaj was ashamed and hung his head. So before I speak, I just want to say, Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Raghunata Shri Vishakanvitam Shra He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopeshna Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Taptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Sorry, we should have done this earlier.
That's okay. Better late than never. With everything in terms of our spiritual lives, better late than never. So in meditating on this verse, I'm like, when I read this verse and this purport, I'm just literally blown away by the Vaishnava qualities of Bali Maharaj. And in one sense, when we read the Srimad Bhagavatam, we read about these great Vaishnavas, we should be blown away by the incredible characteristics of the Vaishnavas, especially for those of us that are quite demoniac, that their reactions in different situations are sometimes like almost bewildering how advanced they are in their ability to react with these most extraordinary qualities. And this state, his humility, that he was actually like ashamed to show his face. Like he was like, he felt, what is this? He actually considered himself to be an offender. And I'm thinking, Bali Maharaj literally just surrendered his life, his everything, to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And I'm thinking, if I surrender a little something, then I think, yeah, that's right, I surrendered something to Krishna, right? No, Bali Maharaj isn't showing any kind of pride. He's actually like, maybe I shouldn't put myself in the position. Can you plug in the computer? In the position of these great Vaishnavas, but sometimes I like to think, like, if I was in this position, how would I be reacting? Just to understand the significance between the difference between my demoniac propensities and the propensities of these pure devotees. If I was in such a position, the Supreme Personality, number one, the Supreme Personality of Godhead probably wouldn't come before me asking anything, because like, what does he want from me, But, and yet still Krishna allows us to serve him because he's so merciful and so kind that even he allows demons to serve him. But anyways, and even though Bali Maharaj took birth in the family of demons, he's exhibiting these qualities of a pure devotee. That,
yeah, go ahead. You want to finish the sentence?
I was going to finish the point.
Yeah.
And that Bali Maharaj offered himself completely at the lotus feet of the Lord, literally at the lotus feet of the Lord. And instead of making excuses when Krishna wanted to bind him up and say, actually, you promised me 3 steps of land and you've only been able to offer me 2. He didn't say, but wait, Krishna, I'm literally offering you my life. I'm offering you everything. Why are you binding me up? This is unfair. Because that's what I would do in such a situation. I would try to plead my case to Krishna and say, wait a minute, I'm offering everything to you. Doesn't that mean anything? But Bali Maharaj is taking this extraordinarily humble position. He doesn't even he doesn't disagree for a minute with Krishna's desire to bind him up. And he literally feels remorse that he wishes he could have kept his vow.
But at this point, I just want to interject. It was not just that, that he couldn't keep his vow. But if you look at the whole context, I think like Chaitanya Charan Prabhu pointed out, it was the Lord who acted dishonorably. He came in the form of a dwarf, and then he gave a whole lecture to Bali Maharaj about greed, why one shouldn't be too greedy. And then he said, I just want 3 paces of land measuring according to the length of my foot. And so and then Bali Maharaj said, ask something more. He said, no, this is, we don't want to be too greedy. But then he actually basically scammed Bali Maharaj. He, after covering the entire upper and lower portions of the universe with his first 2 steps, he asked Bali Maharaj, where can I put the third step? And so then, so not only did he practice what he was not preaching, he scammed him, and he arrested him, and then he accused Bali Maharaj of not fulfilling his duty, like triple whammy, there. And so of course Bali Maharaj is a very, very strong case to plead his position, to say what's going on. You cheated me, and you embarrassed me, and you bound me up with ropes in front of my family members. And for a king he was actually kind of practically took Indra's position, which is to be king of the whole celestial realms and the king of the universe. For that kind of, imagine the whole world is watching, to be put in that kind of position, and to be humiliated like this. It's very, 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 very difficult to go through that kind of humiliation in front of your wife and your family and so on, especially for most of our Kshatriya. For us, it's kind of inconceivable because we always see politicians being shamed in public, and they don't seem to, be bothered too much about it. I think maybe they even thrive in the shame. I don't know, but
yeah, they get bothered about it.
Yeah,
I mean, not that I pay attention to politics or anything.
But someone like Bali Maharaj's caliber, he's a Kshatriya, and Kshatriya must fulfill his vow at all costs, and he's been celebrated as the great invader and the conqueror of Indra. For someone to be embarrassed in such a position is actually almost like death. And now you can continue. So instead of that, like what you were saying, instead of feeling angry and offended by the Lord, he actually felt a sense of shame and humility. And Prahlad Maharaj, his grandfather, came before him. And just before you continue, I just want to bring another point, that this idea of in one of the reasons why we have the Vedic scriptures recommend monarchy is also one of this, for this purpose, where you have this sense of obligation that you want to keep up the prestige of a dynasty. So that becomes a motivating factor to ensure that you protect the citizens and you rule the country properly, because you want to increase or at least maintain the prestige of your ancestors. In this case, Bali Maharaj felt shame because he remembered that Prahlad Maharaj had invoked the Lord, such a great Mahabhagavata, renowned all over the world. And he invoked Narsinghadev, and here he is being arrested in front of the Lord. So he felt shame. So, go on.
Yeah, you brought up so many good points of highlighting how ridiculous it seems that Bali Maharaj is taking a humble position, and yet that is just naturally how the pure devotees react. That I love how Bali Maharaj, how the point that you brought up of how Vamanadev really tricked him. And how Bali Maharaj took it with such grace. So I was thinking also how interesting it is in his feeling of being an offender and presenting himself before his grandfather, Prahlad Maharaj, as a great devotee, as a pure devotee, that he felt I mean, you kind of brought up this point. You already brought up this point, the point that I was going to make, but that's okay. I think you should just give the class. Of how Bali Maharaj is in front of Prahlad Maharaj exhibited this shame because of the importance of representing the family properly and bringing glory to the ancestors. And again, he didn't feel like, oh, I'm glorifying, I'm pure. He never felt the feeling of, oh, I'm purifying so many generations forward and backward because I'm surrendering my life to Krishna. He felt ashamed. It's just ridiculous. It's just crazy to me that he felt ashamed for surrendering his life to Krishna. But that's not in his mind what he felt ashamed for. He felt ashamed because he hadn't been able to reciprocate with Krishna the way that Krishna in the form of Vamanadev was asking him to reciprocate. And so that's really at the heart of a devotee, is that their only desire is to please and serve Krishna. Their desire isn't even necessarily to surrender to Krishna as much as it is the desire to please and serve Krishna. And so in this particular instance, Bali Maharaj's shame and disappointment in himself was coming from a place of his intense desire to please and satisfy Vamanadev, which, although Vamanadev was acting like he hadn't done, again, probably just to, because so many times Krishna puts it's explained that Krishna puts his devotees, his pure devotees, into difficulties just to glorify them, which is different from the reason why he puts those of us that still have demoniac tendencies into difficulties, which is another topic. But for his pure devotees, he puts them into great difficulties just to highlight and exemplify their incredible Vaishnava qualities. Like Prabhupada says in this famous quote in the Krishna book, that you can understand the greatness of a person by their ability to tolerate provoking situations. And what greater example of that is this than this example with Bali Maharaj. And so anything else you want to say on that topic before we move on?
Next page.
Okay. Well, I was thinking it would be interesting to discuss how devotees, or at least those of us that are aspiring to be devotees, because when we read about these real devotees in the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Chaitanya Bhagavat, and how real devotees react in situations, it not only is it nice to see their exhibitions of humility, but it also humbles us to read about these great Vaishnavas and kind of puts us in our place. But it's also good to reflect on how those of us that are aspiring Vaishnavas deal with these not as pure, but similar emotions of shame and feelings of being an offender, which happens especially when we do still have demoniac tendencies. Whether it's like gross things like attraction to sense objects, or subtle things like the desires for profit, adoration, distinction, envy of other Vaishnavas, or envy of any other living being at all, anger, greed, illusion, all of these things. So naturally, when we take to the process of Krishna consciousness, even just the process, even when we aren't actually that Krishna conscious per se, but we're just beginning, like the dawning of somehow remembering that, oh yeah, I'm actually supposed to be a devotee of Krishna. Why have I been a devotee of Krishna's material energy for so many lifetimes? That was a mistake. And that we rather see, when we begin to take shelter of hearing and chanting and serving the Vaishnavas, then our actual demoniac tendencies begin to show themselves before us. And whereas Bali Maharaj actually, although again born in a demoniac family, didn't have any of these. He was completely bereft of demoniac tendencies, which is incredible.
Well, I mean, he was interested in conquering the world. He had that thing. Of doing that. So somehow or other, that is also there. We cannot deny that as well.
Yeah, but the Pandavas also.
No, but he was conquering to. What his conquer was different, because his conquer was denying the authority of Vishnu by trying to take the universe away from Lord Vishnu's established agents, the demigods.
That's a good point, actually.
Anyway,
I don't have a rebuttal.
Anyways, that's not the major point of the defense essay, so you can go ahead. Yeah.
Well, that we could explore that more if you want to.
No, it's okay. You can, because there are other things you want to talk about, not so much whether he's a devotee from birth or not. I don't think that's the main point.
Well, at least at this point.
Please.
Okay. So, yeah, I was thinking it would be interesting. How is it that what can we learn from Bali Maharaj's example to take into our own spiritual lives, of how one reacts when they feel like an offender? So what did Bali Maharaj do? He in his feelings of shame, he offered his obeisances to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He offered his obeisances also to the senior Vaishnavas, Prahlad Maharaj. And he offered prayers of regret. And what he didn't do was turn on Netflix or try to run away from his problems. He didn't. He also didn't sit there and wallow in his sorrow and just like sit around thinking of what a horrible person he is, and how he's not qualified to, serve Krishna, so why should he even try? Which is sometimes the way that those of us that are conditioned, because pride and self-hatred are two sides of the same coin, because it's really putting oneself in the center. But we can see from Bali Maharaj's example that although he did feel these real feelings of shame and humility, he immediately, in his shame and feelings of being an offender, he took shelter of the Lord, and he offered intense prayers and really honestly felt bad that he couldn't offer 3 steps of land. And I was thinking also how, I mean, in one sense, it's heartbreaking when you get to see, if you get the opportunity to see through reading the scriptures or through actually associating with such great Vaishnavas who are on our planet today, it's almost heartbreaking when we come across such incredible humility. Like not heartbreaking, it's like heart-wrenching, right? And it should be, because that's how we become inspired to actually also develop these qualities of humility and surrender. And I was thinking of Lord Chaitanya and Srila Haridas Thakur, that when Haridas Thakur was exhibiting his own humility before the Lord, Lord Chaitanya actually said, "Your humility is breaking my heart." Before, how do you break the heart of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Apparently, through humility. I was seeing this beautiful quote from Srila Prabhupada, that Prabhupada was defining humility in the in chapter 13, text 8 of the Bhagavad Gita and a purport. He said, humility means that one should not be anxious to have the satisfaction of being honored by others. And Bali Maharaj perfectly exhibits this, because he was in the most honorable position any human being could possibly be in, as the king, and as a great Vaishnava, as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It literally came before him. What more honorable position is there than that? And yet he obviously wasn't anxious for the satisfaction of being honored by others. He was in this particular situation. I mean, did you want to comment?
Yeah, but after you finish the point, you want to say something about Bhakti Thakur and
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
So anyways, I was also meditating on the prayers of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and how Bhaktivinoda Thakur exhibits this quality of humility also as an incredible Vaishnava in his many of his prayers, especially his Sharanagati prayers. How he says that he has literally no qualification. There's one, I forget the name of the prayer, but it's one of the ones I think in Sharanagati where he goes through and that's not, I don't think that's the one I was thinking of. But I mean, because he shows his intense humility in so many of his prayers. But the one I was thinking of was where he says something along the lines of how I wasted my childhood playing, and then somehow my intelligence developed, and then I, engaged my intelligence in learning, and then in making money and maintaining my family. And now all of a sudden I'm an old man and I've wasted my life not serving the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is, it's, when we hear these things, again, it's almost heartbreaking, because it's like, no, Bhaktivinoda Thakur revised the entire Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhanta, and he in the whole Gaudiya Vaishnava movement, he reestablished everything that Lord Chaitanya came to give, that had been degraded over time because of sahajas and others. And he reestablished all of that. And he did such incredible things. And yet he, at the end, his old age, is feeling like, I've wasted my life. I've done nothing. And also in his Gopinath prayers, how he says, anyways, my husband has other points to make, so I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah, so I just want to point, the main point I'm making is that this idea of shame, it can be negative or it can be positive. For example, if we have failed in our meeting our vows to Guru and Krishna, one way is, the shame sort of overwhelms us, and we use that to block us from Krishna. So in that way, shame can be a very negative emotion. But shame can also be a positive emotion if we are genuinely, using it to assess, to look at our anarthas and to be honest with Krishna and to pray to Krishna, and to use that as a platform to make us stronger in our devotional service to Krishna. So that is where I think it's applicable for those of us who are on the stage of the sadhaka. And I also want to point out another parallel example, and where the importance of the mercy of the devotee is also very important. And in the Shastra, we also hear of the pastime of the Kaliya serpent. Now, both of Bali Maharaj and Kaliya serpent actually have some parallels. Both of them had the Lord's lotus feet on the head. In Kaliya's case, Krishna was dancing on his head even, so his wives, say, how is he so fortunate? What did he do in his previous life? What kind of dharma austerities did he perform? But Vishwanath Chakravarti actually reveals it actually is just Krishna's inconceivable mercy. In Bali Maharaj's case, also he had, and both of them were arrested, and both of them, in Kaliya's case, he couldn't offer his obeisances to the Lord because he was beaten up too badly. So he just bowed his head down. In Bali Maharaj's case, he was bound up, so he couldn't offer his obeisances to Prahlad Maharaj. But both of them felt a great remorse. And both of them offered these wonderful prayers. And in Kaliya's case, he says, what can I do? I'm a snake. I know we have so many varieties of living creatures. I have this conditioning, so please forgive me. So in the same way, we can adopt the mood of Bali and Kaliya and be honest with the Lord and say, we have all this conditioning we're trying to struggle with. So kindly, in Kaliya's case, he said, you can punish me or you can reward me, whatever you want. But please, keep me engaged in your service. And Krishna gave him a service to be actually one of his vehicles next to, as alternative to Garuda. So I just want to make the point how both of them, in Kaliya's case also, he had his wives, pure devotees to the Lord who intervened for him. And in Bali Maharaj's case, he had Prahlad Maharaj, he had his wife, he had Brahma to intervene for him. So we can also, pray for the mercy of our spiritual masters, of Guru Dev, Srila Prabhupada, Bhakti Siddhanta Sri Thakur, and in their name, pray to Krishna for mercy and forgiveness, for our transgressions, and use that as a platform to become even more stronger in our spiritual lives. Going to, shall we ask for questions?
Just take questions, yeah.
Okay, so let's. Any points, questions, corrections? Please jump in.
Thank you so much, both of you, for an amazing dynamic discussion. I really like the points that how you even started with emphasizing about the color and among, like from the first translation. It was quite a nice point to pick up from that translation. And also, I had one question, like Bali Maharaj is specifically feeling shame, like he didn't do anything wrong. Still, like it's quite like difficult to understand why will he feel shame, because he only gave already everything that he had, but still we see he is feeling shame. And today we tend to many times like take all these words shame and all these things as like very not so healthy for spiritual life, and different kinds of terms are there. So you want to speak anything about that?
Well, he felt like he did something wrong, even though he didn't do anything wrong, because it's described that as a pure devotee, for those who are really advanced, the more advancement you make, actually, the more humility you feel. This feelings of shame, and you can really get a hold of that actually in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's prayers. That the more a devotee advances, the less advanced they actually feel. So it's funny, because then you wonder, like, when will I ever know if I'm making advancement? And it's like, because the less advanced that you feel, then it's like, oh, okay, does that mean I'm making advancement? But I don't feel advanced at all. I just feel less advanced. Better we not speculate too much on that. It will just drive yourself crazy. But I think that is a significant point, that as a devotee, the more advanced a devotee is, like Prabhupada was asked, are you the guru of the world? And he literally, his natural reaction, he wasn't just trying to be humble. He was like, no, I'm just everyone's servant,
But also, I think in regards to your point about today's context, I think that sometimes the name of spirituality and self-love, we are encouraged to even be shameless about anartha sometimes, I think, in the name of self-love. But the self-love is actually supposed to be love for the soul and its relationship to Krishna. So I think a certain amount of discomfort with our faults is healthy if you want to grow and develop. But I think sometimes, like what is said in today's context, that kind of discomfort with one's ignorance is discouraged.
It can go to an extreme either way, though.
Yeah.
That if one is, oh, Jai Radhamali Dar Gaur Chandra Ki Jai. Can I finish my point, or should I? Okay. It can go to an extreme in both ways, definitely. If one says, oh no, I don't want to feel shame, let me just do whatever feels right in the name of spiritual. I mean, obviously Prabhupada in our movement, that was like never never given as an example. But it can also go in the other way, where our shame can actually become like crippling to us. And that's actually something that I see happening more in the movement. I mean, there's definitely people there are examples of people who will be like, oh, whatever, it's no big deal, like, breaking regulative principles, like, you can still chant Hare Krishna, but it's going to affect your ability to actually really chant nicely. It's going to affect your ability to really make significant spiritual advancement if you're not following certain things. And yet we still need to be compassionate and encouraging for people that are struggling, of course, but at the same time, like, not making excuses like, oh, whatever, I don't have to feel bad about it. Because like my husband was saying, a little like guilt can actually propel us towards Krishna, to take shelter of Krishna.
Yeah.
And if we don't feel guilty about something, then we will never give it up. So a little bit of guilt is good, but too much guilt can keep us from taking shelter of Krishna.
I think
Because
we need to forgive ourselves too.
Yeah.
Like, forgive other people, but we also need to also practice forgiveness towards our own self as well.
Yeah.
And also, like I said, invoking the mercy of in the names of the pure devotees, and pray to Krishna.
Yeah. Just one quick point on
Someone
how.
wanted to say, I think Alan wanted to say something.
Just one second. Just how is it that too much guilt can actually come in the way of our relationship with Krishna? I think is an important thing, is because again, this idea of like we put ourselves down, and then we become too ashamed to show our face before Krishna, in the sense of like sometimes people can become too ashamed to come to the temple or to associate with devotees, because they feel, oh, I'm too fallen, I don't want to contaminate the devotees with my bad association. And then they just keep themselves, because the thing that we need to propel us further is the association of Vaishnavas, is to take shelter of Krishna, where we don't want to show Krishna how bad or how horrible we are. So then we don't want to chant the holy names. We don't want to call Krishna into our lives. But that's exactly the opposite thing that's going to help us make spiritual advancement, is that we need to take shelter of the Vaishnavas. We need to take shelter of the holy names. We need to take shelter of the processes of sadhana bhakti, and not hide from Krishna, hide. And in that way, it's important to find that balance between, a healthy amount of shame and guilt, that actually, so that we can see where do we need to improve in our lives, what aspects of ourselves on gross or subtle levels are keeping us from making advancement, but not allowing that shame and guilt itself to keep us from making advancement.